Hi, friend. When I had a yoga teacher say to me, Amanda, I never knew I was a business owner until you told me I was one, I immediately knew that I wanted to change that. And I wanted to share business lessons and techniques that I knew with yoga teachers so they could be empowered. So in that moment, I thought, how cool is this? I just invented a new career that no one else is doing. Well, I was super wrong on that assumption. Upon a very quick Google search, I found that there were other people doing business coaching for yoga teachers. And I have to admit that in that moment, I thought, oh no, there's other people already doing this. But quickly, that turned into a validation of my idea. Because if there were other people doing what I thought was a cool idea, then it was a good idea, and that means it was needed. So that was all I allowed in that thought. And immediately, I just started reaching out and introducing myself because I was the new player in this group of people who are doing business coaching for yoga teachers. And the people that I reached out to, I was so lucky that when I reached out, that they just welcomed me to the yoga teacher business coaching party. And I'm so glad that I started to reach out because collaboration and just knowing other people in this industry has made all the difference in my business. And one of those people was Amanda Kingsmith. She is the incredible host of Mastering the Business of Yoga podcast. She's also a world traveler and a business coach for yoga teachers and a 500-hour registered yoga teacher herself. Amanda works with yoga teachers across the globe to help them build an authentic business that are both sustainable long-term and financially abundant. She has such a great business background and education, and like me, we both spent time in corporate before entering into the yoga world. And there's so many other things that we have in common. But one thing that we both share is that we both 100% agree on the idea of collaboration over competition. And that's what we talked about in this podcast episode. We had a great conversation, and I know you're going to gain so much from this, including ideas of how you can collaborate with other yoga teachers or local businesses or even online businesses. But before I share our conversation, I want to welcome you to the Marketing Yoga with Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Amanda McKinney, and I'm honored that you're here with me today. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen in. And just remember, if you enjoyed this episode, there's tons more where that came from and lots more coming. So be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can get the new episodes delivered to you automatically. And if you really love the episodes, then show me some love by leaving a review. This is how other yoga teachers will find the podcast and learn as well. So in the spirit of collaborating, share this episode with another yoga teacher in your local area or one that you're connected with online so you can start this conversation. But let's go ahead and dive in. Here's the conversation with Amanda and I. Thank you so much for being here, Amanda.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
I'm so excited you're here. So just in case someone has been living under a rock and does not know who you are, please tell us a little bit about you and how you help yoga teachers.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Amanda. I am a yoga teacher, a podcast host, and a traveler. So I do lots of different things. But within the yoga industry, my main sort of thing that I do outside of teaching is my podcast, which is called Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I blended my background of business. I have a degree in business and a number of years of corporate experience with my love of yoga. I found when I started teaching yoga, like, oh, nobody's like building resumes or making money. And like, why are we selling ourselves and talking about marketing and all this stuff? And so I created a resource where not only I could learn, but also my listeners could learn. And that's really evolved over the last, I guess, almost 4 years, which is pretty crazy, into a bigger business where I work with teachers one-on-one and in group settings, starting to do retreats and more workshop offerings and that sort of thing, really focused on helping yoga teachers build sustainable businesses. That's kind of my whole goal. And when I say sustainable, not really, I mean, definitely environmental sustainability should be important to you, but more like, how can we teach yoga for the rest of our lives? Like, if you want to be a full-time yoga teacher, how can you create a business that's going to support you forever without having to worry about not getting a pension or that sort of thing?
Mm-hmm. I love it so much. And as so many people are probably listening right now, they're like, oh my gosh, you two do the exact same thing. Like so many people are going to think that. And that's exactly what we're talking about today, which is collaboration over competition. And it's something that both you and I believe in so very much. And that's exactly why we're talking about it today, because what you do and what I do is so similar, and how I believe wholeheartedly that there's enough out there for all of us. So I work with yoga teachers, you work with yoga teachers, so we both have heard this, and the idea of feeling like yoga teachers are in competition with one another, and so I just wanna bring that to light and how we can talk about it today, but I would love to hear how this idea of collaboration over competition has influenced your business over the last 4 years, because you and I aren't the only 2 doing this, so there's others of us out there too. So how has this influenced your business?
Yeah. So soon after I started my podcast, I got an email from another podcast host who I don't think is running her podcast anymore, who was also focusing on the business of yoga. And it was funny because she reached out and asked if we could do an interview swap on our podcast. And I immediately was like, yes, of course. But it was funny because she prefaced the whole email with all this information around like, oh, if you don't want to, or you think I'm competition, like no worries, I'm totally fine with that, all this stuff. And I was like, why would I not do this? Like, this is great for both of our businesses. And I feel like I've always been of the mindset that, like, even if I was the top person doing all of this, there's still so many yoga teachers and so much space for other people. Like, the reality is that one of us can't do it all. And even more so than that, it's that, everyone has a different style of things. So even if, you and I's podcast were the exact same and we had the exact same philosophies on every single thing, we could do the exact same episode and it would be totally different from our viewpoints. And that's very much how I think about teaching yoga. It's very much how I think about working with yoga teachers. And then it's funny because you and I are both mutual friends with Shannon Crow from the Connected Yoga Teacher. And her and I had a very similar conversation. She'd reached out being like, I had this great idea for a podcast. And then I realized that you were doing it. And I was like, well, I don't think that should stop you from creating something you're excited about. And she was sort of like, that's not really the answer I expected. And it's very much that mindset where, like, her and I have interviewed many similar people and we have similar topics, but at the same time, our podcasts are totally different. They're completely different shows. And I really believe that if her and I sat down and had the exact same structure for something, but never talked about it would be a totally different episode, which then provides value for different people because they get to hear different mindsets, different thoughts, different ways of approaching things. And I think that that's really, really valuable for people in general. So, yeah, very, very much into collaborating with people over trying to compete with them because I think that competition comes from scarcity or lack mindset. And I think that there's plenty of yoga teachers to go around. I think there's plenty of yoga students to go around. I think there's plenty of yoga classes and studios to go around. And that if we work together, we can, make the industry, make the world a little bit better as opposed to focusing all of our energy on like, how can I get this client over this person or, however that mindset works.
Mhm. I couldn't agree more, and I love the way you phrase that, in that if we work together, we can just make a bigger impact, and that's what we're trying to do. And I love that you brought up how we're both friends with Shannon, and how I just find it so amazing that none of us really even thought about it. Like, I reached out to Shannon very early on in my business and said, "Hey, we're offering very similar things. I think we should be friends." I don't think I really said it like that, but in my head, I was like, I just didn't even think twice about it. And when I share that story, similar to how your story was, like, I just didn't even think about it. But in hindsight, when I share the story, people are like, "Weren't you nervous?" And I'm like, "No, no," because I guess in my mind, without even thinking about it, I had that abundance mindset of there's enough out there. I am a different person than Shannon. I am a different person than you. And so if someone doesn't resonate with me as a marketing coach, as a business coach, then I highly am like, go find someone who does, because what matters to me is that yoga teachers have a sustainable business just like you. I want yoga teachers to earn a ton of money so they can always be teaching yoga. Because
Mhm.
if they don't earn money, they have to earn money somehow, right? Like, unless we have a money tree in the backyard, in which I always say, please invite me to
Yeah,
your
I was just
backyard.
gonna say, where do I get the seed for that?
Right. If you have a money tree, please contact me. I'll definitely be your friend and teach me how to grow that money tree. But unless we have that, we have to earn money somehow. So we might as well earn money doing what we love. And so if we can do that, like if I can help one person do that, that's amazing. If you can help one person do that, that's amazing. And we will resonate with different people. So I also share this, and I'm certain that you do as well. I hear this from the yoga teacher perspective all the time. So I'll say, reach out to yoga teachers in your local area or online if you're an online based yoga teacher, and connect with other yoga teachers and maybe collaborate on something, or just get to know one another so that you can help each other in business. And oftentimes, not every time, but oftentimes I'll get the pushback that's like, but that's my competition, or what if they are doing the same thing? And I have two things that I usually go to. And number one is, if you niche down as a yoga teacher, it takes away a lot of that competition, that feeling of competition. But I also lean towards, there's so much out there. There's enough yoga students out there. So how do you help yoga teachers that are working with you kind of push through that mindset and actually reach out and connect and collaborate with other yoga teachers?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm very much of the same mindset as you, and I've also experience that pushback both as a yoga teacher in the studios and then also with people that I've worked with, where it's like, oh, well, I can't do that. Like, we're offering the same thing. And I'm like, that's an even better reason to reach out to them. Maybe with two of you, you can create something even better than just you would.
Yes.
But I really think that it comes down to the mindset. It comes down to, why are you considering that person competition and why do you not want to reach out to them? And I think that when I personally think about like, if you reach out to me and you're like, hey, let's like have a conversation. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to have a conversation with you. You might steal my ideas. To me, that's very much coming from that scarcity or that lack mindset, like thinking about, there's only space for me or you. There's not space for you and me both. And I think that we really have to get out of that mindset. I think that in general, as yoga teachers, there's lots of people who kind of struggle with this from the money side of things, from the job perspective. And I definitely understand where it comes from, having been, a new yoga teacher a couple years ago, where I'm like, okay, well, there's only so many studios and there's only so many classes to be taught. It's easy to do the math in your head and very quickly find out that, if you don't get some of those coveted positions, you don't make enough money. But I think we need to remember that there are lots of opportunities outside of just teaching a studio class. There's lots of things that we can offer. There's lots of people we can teach. I always say that I really don't think that the yoga industry is going to be like quote unquote saturated until every single human on this planet is doing yoga regularly. There's like
Mhm.
7 billion people on the planet, and 7 billion people are not practicing yoga right now. So until every single person's practicing and every single person has a teacher that they go to, then maybe we'll be in a position of saturated market in terms of yoga. But I still think that there's lots of uncovered territory. So I think that we need to shift our mindset to that and remember that every single one of us has something to offer. All of our voices are different, whether or not you've been teaching for 20 years or 1 day or 2 months or somewhere in between that. There's just a ton of opportunity. And I think that when we shift our mindset into like, okay, there's space for me here, we remember that there's space for everyone. And then I think the conversation becomes more of like, oh, you offer yoga nidra too? Like, could we do a really cool yoga nidra event where we give people more like one-on-one treatment with this um, because they have access to both of us, or maybe one of us can be doing more like hands-on adjustments while the other one's teaching, and then we switch, or maybe we can do a co-teaching event where I do like the flow portion and you do like the meditation portion because you specialize in that. I think there's just lots of opportunities to come together and look at like what we're passionate about and weave that together with other people. And I mean, that gets people introduced to you, to your co-teacher.
Mhm.
It opens you up to a new market. It gives you a new opportunity for revenue, for experience. I just think there's so much cool stuff that can happen within that.
I totally agree. I think there's so much that we can learn through it too. Just like you were saying, if we if we find that someone is offering something similar or has a similar idea, which let's go ahead and say, like if you have the idea for something, 17 other people have that same idea. Like very rarely do we have an idea that's never been thought of before. So we have to really think about that too. And if you have the idea that you want to offer something and you recognize that someone else is doing something similar and you reach out to them, there's so much that you can learn from that person. Maybe they've tried to offer it in the way that you were thinking about offering it, but found that it didn't work in your community. So they actually, made the mistake in a sense, right? But they learned from the mistake. And then you can learn from their experience as well. At least I know I've learned from that in conversations with you and conversations with Shannon and so many other podcasters and business coaches, marketing coaches for yoga teachers. I've learned so much because they've been in the industry longer than I have and were willing to share because someone taught them too. It's so amazing what we can learn from someone else walking a path before us, even if they're like one step ahead of us.
hmm Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was like when I started my podcast, that was kind of my whole idea was like, okay, so I have this business background, but it was very much like a corporate business background. And so I was like trying to figure out how to weave in the things I knew from corporate with the yoga industry. And the things that I was finding was like, okay, the biggest complaints I hear is I teach too much, I'm tired all the time, I'm not making enough money. But I was looking around at people kind of in my Instagram following or like the people I was following that are much bigger than me and the people that I knew from my studios back home. And I was like, well, people are doing this. So there has to be a way. There has to be a way for all of us to do it. Like if one person can do it, somebody else can do it also. And so that was very much like, let me learn from somebody who's like ahead of me so that I can teach people who are kind of like, you know, following behind me sort of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's so helpful. It's a way to give back. And the majority of people, I'm kind of putting everyone into the majority, but I like to believe that the majority of people in this world want to help each other. So, this idea of collaboration can be so rewarding because we are helping people from, like, I don't want someone to make the exact same mistake I did. I want them to learn from the thing that I already did and live through and say, like, oh, you don't want to go down that path. It does not work that well. Instead, take this one and then see what your audience does. So I think there's just so much to learn. And I think there's tons of ways in which yoga teachers can collaborate in either their local area or online with other yoga teachers or other businesses. So we've focused a lot on yoga teacher collaborating, but the other way that I have seen collaborations work in a huge way is when yoga teachers collaborate with another business in their local area. So I hone in and really, really encourage everyone to have a niche if once you've taught for a while. Of course, you need to start somewhere. So you have to say yes to everything to figure out what your niche is going to be. But once you figure out where your passion is and you have decided, yes, I want to teach children's yoga in my local area, or I want to teach online meditation, whatever that is, when you know what that is, you can then see what other businesses have that same audience. And from there, you can really have some pretty cool collaborations. So, have you seen any collaborations like that with different businesses, not yoga teacher, but rather yoga teacher to business?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. My home community, which is Canmore, Alberta, it's a tiny little town in the Canadian Rockies, like an hour outside of Calgary. I think is a really great example of this. It's really close to Banff, so the two communities are pretty interchangeable, and there's not that many people that live there. Like maybe 30,000 in total, plus like a million tourists. um, but there's a ton of yoga teachers. Like when I first moved there, I was like, whoa, I think everyone and their dog has a yoga teacher training here, whether or not they're actually using it. And so I mean, when I started teaching, I was very much of the mindset like, I'm never going to get a job here. There's people who are so good at teaching yoga. Like, where is there space for me? I soon found out that that was not the case. But one of the things that I really love about that community is that there's tons of cool collaborations happening with yoga. There's almost always yoga teachers teaching at all of the running events. So we do like tons of cool outdoor races there. And they're always looking for like somebody to come and do like a stretch session or something like that for the runners afterwards. And I think that that's probably like more of a swap for something as opposed to like a paid gig, but it's like a cool way to get into the community. Tons of the businesses offer yoga. So like Lululemon offers their community yoga, Patagonia offers yoga. I feel like there's a couple others. There's a couple like massage studios that were doing that. Lots of events like uh, teaming up with like a spa or somewhere that sells essential oils or like handcrafted soaps and offering a class there to their audience. Because that's very much like in line with kind of I think the values of people who like yoga are probably interested in like local handmade soaps or handcrafted goods and stuff like that. Some other cool things I've seen are like with coffee shops or even bars. We actually did, I worked for Lululemon for a while and we got a local yoga teacher to come and do like a neon class at a bar, which
That's
was,
fun.
yeah, it was pretty cool because like the lights were dark and everyone was encouraged to wear white. And then there was like some of those cool like neon wristbands and stuff. So everyone was glowing. And we did like a really cool flow in this bar and then had like drinks and stuff after. And that's a really fun way to do that. We've done like local collaborations with different businesses. You can do like Vino and Vinyasa if that's something you want, looking at breweries and how you can bring maybe like yoga into a brewery and do yoga and then have a community event after that. I've seen tons of like brunch events. So you can teach yoga, maybe if they have a deck or something, and then coordinate with the restaurant to have brunch as a part of their ticket cost. So yeah, there's tons of things you can do depending on what you're sort of interested in. I mean, if you're not interested in pairing yoga with food or alcohol, that's fine. You could look at what businesses in your community kind of align with your values and your beliefs. Like if you really love coffee, see if you can get into a coffee shop and maybe offer a public class or maybe even teach their staff or something like that. That can be a really cool way um, to do that. I've also seen like lots of workshops where local musicians come in and they play the music while the yoga teacher
Ah.
teaches. So that could be in a studio or in like more of a community space or even outside. But it's really cool to look at like people who have sort of like similar skill sets to you as a yoga teacher that pair really nicely with yoga. There is a yoga psychologist in my community, or not a yoga psychologist, sorry, yoga teacher, and also like a counselor slash psychologist. And she does really cool like personal development workshops.
That's really neat.
Yeah, I could keep going. I feel like there's so much stuff.
I love it. I wish we could keep on going, which we totally can for a while. I have never seen the local musician play during an actual class. That's a really cool one. I have heard of it. I've never seen it and never witnessed it, but it's very cool.
It's awesome too. I've been to a yoga nidra and cello event that was at like my home
Ooh.
studio, and it's awesome. Like instead of having music, there's like a person in the corner playing the cello, and she can really coordinate like her playing with kind of like the energy of the room and where the practice is going and that sort of thing. Yeah, having if somebody can do like drums or something like that, that's really cool. Something else that is actually one of my favorite offerings that my home studio does is one of the teachers offers restorative and then the other one does craniosacral release, and they
Mm.
team up. It can only be a really small group because everything's very hands-on, but they co-teach it back and forth, and it's like like it sells out in like 20 minutes. I'm not even joking. Like if you want a spot, you got to like when it goes live, you got to book
Yeah.
that spot. I've only been once and I felt amazing after.
That's the thing is that when you can find something like that, then it can be an ongoing offering that starts to gain traction because I guarantee you that the first time that they offered that, it didn't sell out in 20 minutes.
Mhm.
What they did was they had a great event and then it started to gain some traction. And now they offer it every so often, however often it is. And people know. So they buy that ticket right away. And I think there's a few things there. Number one, it's figuring out who you want to collaborate with, right? And I think that comes down to what do you want to offer and who is your dream student? That's going to help you figure out who exactly you should collaborate with, if it's another yoga teacher or if it's a local business or both, who knows? And the other thing is that oftentimes, if it doesn't work really well the first time, we can often give up on it. But I want to encourage every yoga teacher listening right now to try something. And if you love it, if you believe that it would really work well for your dream student, I want you to try it again and again and again and again. Like, I want you to give it a few times because oftentimes, the first time we try to market a new thing, we don't know what words to use yet because words are so hard. So I think there's that two-step process of number one, figuring out what you want to offer. And that it really needs to come down to who your dream student is and what transformation you want them to have. Do they need relaxation through a restorative class? Do they want to have a fun brunch with their friends? What is going to make them have a great positive experience? And then figuring out who you can collaborate with.
Mhm.
I think looking at online or not online. So I think it's like thinking about in-person like boutiques. So let's say you want to target women who you have this certain subset of women that go to this certain boutique. Then have a yoga class in the middle of the dang store. Like, that's going to be so fun and it's going to be something that they will publicize for you. Another thing that I've talked about a lot with yoga teachers who I've coached in some way is thinking about who your person is and what local groups they're involved in. So, not just businesses, but also groups too. So, is it the PTA? Is it a golf group for guys? Is it the chess club? Who cares what it is? Like, is there a group of, engineers that meet once a month and talk about things? They may need to get up away from their computer, right? I know I have to get up away from my computer and
Same.
so think about who your dream student is and what groups they're aligned with or involved with in the local community or online and say, "Hey, can I teach a free class? Or do you have a spot where I can fill with an hour of this?" Or, I think reaching out is the hardest part because we just get nervous about doing it, but the worst they can say is no. That's
Mhm.
the worst that they can say. No one's going to really laugh at you. They're going to be like, "Oh, that's interesting." And maybe they can't do it right away, but the idea is now planted and you can start to have that relationship between that you and that person.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really cool to think about too, like, especially as you're starting, like, and kind of identifying who your dream student is, like, where are they hanging out in the community? Because sometimes we think about like, oh, they're not coming to classes, but it's like, why can't we go to them?
Mhm.
Like if you're in a local coffee shop and you're like, everyone in here is people I want to teach, maybe you can get a class in the coffee shop at a time that's
Yes.
maybe like a slower hour, or maybe a time they'd normally be closed. They could open up for a special event or something like that. Or maybe it is like going to your favorite boutique shop and saying, you know, hey, like I teach yoga. Like, would you be interested in offering a session here? I have a friend who she moved to a new community and she met a friend of a friend who was a hairdresser. And she was like, well, we have, we're closed on Mondays. Like, apparently all hair studios are closed on Mondays in this community. And she's like most of us would like to do yoga because we're all off. Like, why don't you come for like an hour and a half and then we can put it to the public too? And so she taught this really cool class in a hair studio. They just move the chairs out of the way, make sure like the floor is swept and stuff. And it was a perfect spot. It's essentially the exact same as a yoga studio. And I feel like that's the type of thinking that we can do in terms of like, how do we get ourselves in front of more people? And more specifically, like, how do we get ourselves in front of the people that we want to be teaching? And then how can we, collaborate with businesses that are not necessarily in our industry? Like we think about yoga studios, sometimes we think about community halls. sometimes we think about parks and stuff like that, but it's not often that somebody's like, oh, hey, maybe there's an opportunity for me to teach in this hair studio or this hair salon.
Right. But it's so perfect. And it's out of, to be cliche, it's out of the box, right? Like we're thinking a little bit differently. And more importantly, we're offering something to our dream student where they are. I love what you said. Like if we have dream students who just aren't coming to class and we're thinking, why don't they come to class? Well, you go to them. And I love the way that you said that because most of the time I do hear, yoga teachers saying like, oh, it was everyone who was in that room I would love to teach. Like it was the perfect group of people. Well, then figure out how to get in front of that group of people and offer them something. And I think so much of it comes down to seizing the opportunity because I have witnessed and myself, I have done this myself. So I'm going to raise my hand and say I have done this as well. But so many times we have people asking us for what we provide and we don't offer it. So if you notice, dear yoga teacher friend listening to this right now, if you are in a room and you notice these are my people and someone found out that you're a yoga teacher and someone says, "Oh my gosh, I wish we had a time where we could all get together and do yoga." Well, come up with an offer right then. Like you just say, you figure it out. My friend who doesn't know she's my friend is Marie Forleo says everything is figure outable. So in that moment, you make an offer and figure it out. You just say, okay, what do you want and when can I do it? Here, let's put it together right now. I'll invoice you as soon as I get home today. Like, just make it happen because those are the people who are ready right there. But I think so often we can let those opportunities like go by and we won't seize the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think I can relate to like I've definitely let those opportunities go. Like I think we're all human. We all have those moments where we're like, "Oh, I should be like, saying something, but I'm just sitting back here for whatever reason. Maybe it's fear or discomfort, or maybe you feel like you're not ready or you don't have your packages perfectly figured out and you don't know what price you offer and that sort of thing." But we kind of just have to take that leap of faith at some point and put ourselves out there. That's one of the things that I always recommend with new yoga teachers is like nobody's going to know that you teach unless you tell them, and you have to be able to like communicate that to people to let them know that you're like open and available for opportunities. And um, I feel like if you get like a bit more spiritual with it, like there really is this like like you need to be open in order for things to come in. Like when we close ourselves off, like metaphorically, things like can't come to us. It's almost like we've got this like protective bubble and stuff just bounces off. So it's like these opportunities that might have come, you close yourself off to.
I couldn't agree more, and I couldn't have said it better because that is so true. We have to be open to those opportunities, and it's important to recognize them when they're there, but give ourselves grace when we don't take those opportunities because like you said, we've all had them. And I feel like that's a great place for us to kind of wrap this up and say, you know, we have all the opportunities. The world is our oyster. There's more than enough out there, but I think we just have to open ourselves up to that and think about collaboration over competition and really starting to shift that mindset, like you said, and thinking abundantly instead of in the scarcity model, because there is enough out there for everyone and not everyone has the same passion. So we
Mhm.
can all tap into something totally different. And even if we both want to share, you or someone else, you want to share the exact same thing, you're not going to do it in the same way. Just like you and I offer very similar offerings, but don't do it in the same way.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, just to kind of tag on with that, I think don't be afraid to get to know people in your community. Don't be afraid to reach out. I find actually like teaching yoga can be a little bit lonely. People always think about, oh, you're in front of students all the time. And yes, that is very true. And that can be very like energetically and physically draining. But it's kind of like we only cross paths with other teachers if we are intentional about going to their classes, if we're friends with them or, making the effort to go for coffee or something like that. Or maybe at like the crossover between classes when you're like, hey, do you want me to like check in your students or put out props for you? Like what can I do for you? I feel like there's there isn't this actual like community unless you kind of create it. And I think that it's really important that if you see somebody doing something cool, to like reach out to them, have that conversation, get to know them, see how maybe you can help them or they can help you, or maybe how you can work together. Because, even if you have no interest in co creating a workshop or co teaching, like maybe the restorative teacher can help promote your vinyasa classes. And you can do the same vice versa because you offer something totally different. So, there's lots of ways that we can work together as yoga teachers. And I think being open to getting to know each other and remembering that there's a place for all of us is really, really important. And it'll also be a lot more, I think it's just a lot more inspiring when you have a community of like minded people. You're like, oh, right, I'm not just this like person who does this weird stuff by myself. It's like there's tons of people offering tons of really amazing things. So fill your community with like minded people.
I love that. And I love that you kind of put that in perspective of reach out and tell someone that they are doing something really cool. I think that is the perfect advice for anyone who's just like, you know what? I do want to connect with other yoga teachers, but I don't know how. Well, that's the perfect way to do that. I mean, if you're following some local yoga teachers that you know online, but don't know in person and think they're doing cool things, tell them because
Hmm.
they're going to be super pumped about it. Because how pumped would you be if someone, a local yoga teacher in your area or an online yoga teacher, reached out to you and said, I think what you're doing is so cool? You would be like, yay, someone is thinking that what I'm doing is good. And let's talk. And I always think like growing that community is so important because, like you said, it is so lonely when you are a business owner, when you're an entrepreneur, because you are as a yoga teacher, that can be so lonely. We can sit behind our computer screens. Yes, you are teaching classes, but so much of your business is behind a computer screen, doing the work and feeling like you're all by yourself doing all of this. So connecting with other people is so important. And I think congratulating someone on doing something cool is the perfect way to introduce yourself.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. Working remotely, if you're somebody who works with yoga teachers, I mean, you and I both know it can also be quite lonely. And I think we can either be in the perspective of like head down, doing the work, not paying attention to what other people are doing, which is kind of how I tend to be a little bit, or we get like uber focused on what other people are doing. And I think it would be easy for me to look at like you or Shannon and be like, oh, Shannon's group is so much bigger than mine. And Amanda just had this really cool launch of a membership. Like, why am I not doing enough? And I think that that's another mindset that we have to shift. And when you get to know somebody, like, and like I know you both. So it's like I know that there's challenges. I know that there's like
Right.
hardships. I know it's not like you're just sitting there being like, oh, this is so easy, like we're all humans going through it. But I think when you can actually connect with people and have those conversations with them, you realize that like we're all just kind of in this together doing our best.
Yes. So true.
So, yeah, that would be like my final words of advice is like get to know the people that maybe you're looking at as competition because you'll recognize that, you're probably not so different from them and that you can actually have really great conversations about stuff that maybe you were like, oh, they're ahead of me and I'm comparing myself and I'm not good enough. Um, we need to get out of that mindset in general, but as a human, it is hard. And I think that part of breaking that down is just connecting with those people because then you just recognize that we are all humans just trying to do things we love and do our best.
Yeah, and we can learn so much, and I think I mirror everything that you just said in that it's so nice to have those conversations to realize I'm not on an island by myself. I have these other people who are doing the same things. Let's band together and figure this out together and support one another. It's so powerful when you can have, like you and I supporting each other's launch of whatever is next, right? And
Mhm.
the next thing that's coming up. But yoga teachers can do the exact same thing. And like you said, that restorative teacher can totally promote another, let alone it could be another restorative class, but it could also be a vinyasa class or insert whatever class you want to say. Like we can support one another and the community grows. Most people while they might have a preference to one style of yoga, will try out another style of yoga. So we can all help each other and promote each other's classes and workshops, and we'll fill them faster. We'll impact the community more and impact more lives, which is what yoga teachers always want to do. So that's why you and I work with them, because they're so cool and impacting the world in such a positive way.
Yeah, yeah, you said so much good stuff there. I really just love all of that. And yeah, I really love what you said about like, maybe it is just another restorative class. I think that that's something that we even forget about. Like there might be a class that's just a better time for somebody, and that's great. If
Right.
somebody's practicing more yoga, I feel like we're doing our job, and that's great. Like that is better for humanity as a whole if more people are doing yoga, and I think we need to remember that.
And everything else will figure it out. Like our
Mm.
business will still grow. We will gain more students in our class or fill our private sessions or whatever it is that you're looking to do in your business. Like it will come because you're supporting other people. Like I don't have research to show that this works. I just know that it does. Like
Yeah.
there's just a way of it coming back. And when we support one another, it just happens that way.
Yeah, totally. I think people are attracted to like good energy, good people. And I think that being able to be like, oh, if you really like restorative, go check out Cindy's class Tuesday at noon. I don't think you're like losing a student by doing that. I think that by sitting in a place of fear and lack of not helping that person find another class is probably in the end what's going to, have them leave your class or become like not a consistent student for you. So I think that people like feel that stuff subconsciously, even if we're not aware of it. And I think that, like attracts like, and people want to be around people who are, engaged and excited and inspired and supportive of one another.
Absolutely. We need more of it in the world anyway. So
Absolutely.
I appreciate your support of me and my podcast, because you totally didn't have to come on here today. But I love that we have connected. I love this topic so very much. So thank you so much for coming on here and talking about it today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. I feel like I could talk to you all day. I was like, you're like, we're wrapping up. I'm like, I just have like 10 more minutes of things to say.
We can just keep on talking. We can
Yeah.
keep on talking. But thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
Oh my goodness. I seriously could have kept talking with Amanda all day long. She shared so many gems and so many ideas of collaboration that I enjoyed so much. And I know you're inspired too. So here's your next best step. What I would love for you to do is to tell a local yoga teacher or one that you know online that you think something that they're doing is awesome. So whether they have an offering that you think is just really cool or unique, or they share information on social media, or the way they present themselves, or their website is amazing, whatever it is that made you think of them during this episode, I want you to tell them. Reach out to them today and start the conversation. You might not have any idea where the conversation is going to go, but I want you to use this podcast episode as a way to keep the conversation going. You can even tell them that you listened to this episode and thought of them immediately, so you wanted to tell them, great job, and just see where it goes. Because if we can shift our mindset and remember that there is enough for all of us, then we will impact more people in this world with yoga, which is all of our goals. Until next time, give yourself permission to collaborate and grace along the way. I'll talk to you soon.